Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Willful Ignorance podcast. I, of course, am your host, Will, and today we are joined by a special guest, my older brother, Jack, because we are going to talk about history. Now, history is an important thing to know, but the thing is, I don't know enough about it, that's why I have my brother here who is about to graduate from the U with a history degree, among other degrees, this May, and you have enough credits to have a history degree right now anyways, right? So,
more or less.
Yeah, all right. So this guy knows his stuff, if you believe in the university accreditation system. All right, let's get into it. So how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Daily, or my GPA drops. I've taken a number of classes on Rome and am a student of classical Latin, so it's a pretty constant thing in my head.
So now, if I'm not wrong, Rome was originally a republic and then it became an empire. Do you think about the republic more or the empire more?
That's a great question. It was a kingdom before it was either of those two things.
See, there you go.
And I think about that kingdom very rarely. But I would say I spend more time today thinking about the Roman Empire because I'm working my way through the Aeneid in one of my classes.
And the Aeneid is?
It's an epic poem written by this guy named Virgil, Publius Vergilius Maro. And he writes it right as the empire's beginning. And this poem is designed to tie the existence of this new political entity of kind of the empire, right, of this imperial ruling family to the creation of Rome.
So Virgil was like his nickname. What did you say
His full name is Publius Vergilius Maro. Roman names work a little different from modern, well, the names we have in America. I don't know where that originates, probably England. But his first name, Publius, would have likely just been used by close family members, right? It's really to just differentiate him within his family. Where Vergilius, that's where we get Virgil, refers to a smaller family group. I don't know exactly how that works. And Maro refers to this wider clan group that he was associated with.
Now, if I'm not wrong, he also wrote some of the Federalist Papers?
No.
Oh.
His other writings are simply the Bucolics. That's one set of poems, and then I'm forgetting the name of the other.
Fair enough. So let's get into it. This transition period from the Republic to the Empire. Let's dive into that. Take it away.
Well, it's this fascinating period of time, right, with all these really larger-than-life Roman figures. You have Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey, right? Caesar, this amazingly ambitious politician. He's entirely determined to have power. He's charismatic. People love him. But again, he is focused on his own power. He enters this uneasy alliance with Crassus, the richest man in Rome by far, who's a terrifying person. He more or less invents the first firefighting service, but it's not a public firefighting service. It's not a public good. It's a private thing. So he shows up to your house when it's burning and negotiates with you what you will pay to save your house. A lot of that involves him seizing people's property. He becomes rich very quickly. He's saying, well, I'll save some of the house if I can just keep the property and you just get to keep a couple of your things, right? He also brings back a practice called decimation into the Roman military earlier in his career. When they retreat in battle or when he's displeased, 1 in every 10 soldiers is beaten to death by the other 9. So he's a horrendous human being. Not that any of these people aren't. The last is Pompey, who's another charismatic figure. He's when this little alliance starts, which is referred to as the first triumvirate, even though it's not actually a legal triumvirate. When this uneasy alliance starts, he's the most powerful and interesting. He's celebrated 3 triumphal parades, right? 3 triumphs for conquest in Europe, Asia, and Africa, the 3 known continents to the Romans. He's an incredibly powerful and charismatic figure. And yet, he eventually is going to clash with Julius Caesar and lose.
Interesting. So, a legal triumvirate.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
A triumvirate is kind of a special commission, right? 3 guys, obviously, and it's assigned to a specific purpose. What's called the first triumvirate, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, isn't any legal structure. The second triumvirate with Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus. No one cares about Lepidus. But that is a legal institution, so it's the first real triumvirate of the 2.
So they switched Crassus out for Lepidus.
Mm-hmm. And, well, they switched all 3 guys out.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't paying attention.
You're fine. Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus.
Okay, was the first.
Then Octavian.
Oh, Octavian.
Caesar's adopted son and actual nephew.
Who had 8 fingers.
Nope. Mark Antony, who
was in that play.
Yes, and has an affair with Cleopatra.
As opposed to Mark Anthony.
That's the same guy.
Wait.
Oh, no, wait. Mark Anthony's a musician, isn't he?
I don't know. What's up with there's no H in Mark Antony, but I feel like you don't hear of people named Antony anymore. They're all Anthony.
That's an anglicization of it, right? His actual name would have been Marcus Antonius.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. And then the third one?
Lepidus.
Lepidus, the leper.
Nope. I couldn't tell you who that guy is.
So it's kind of like a threesome, if you will.
No.
I'll have to look up the meaning of that word later. Anyways, so we have 2 triumvirates, each with 3 totally different guys, totally male, all 2 of them. Yeah.
The first one is this uneasy alliance. Well, they're all uneasy alliances, right? But the first is Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus are kind of working together to gain power for themselves. Crassus has the money. Pompey has the power at the moment, right? He's this beloved figure.
Was he in the Senate?
He was from a senatorial family. Yes, he served in the Senate, but his real importance is as a general, right? Early in his career, he has a lot of success as a military leader, and that's what really makes him beloved.
So the military was tied directly to the government in that sense of generals were also kind of like politicians, would you say?
Yes. So generals are really responsible for taking care of their own troops after the war is over, financially, which leads to this really interesting thing, right, where all these soldiers have loyalty not primarily to their government, but to their general. When Caesar and Pompey fight, they're drawing their troops. Caesar, in particular, is drawing his troops from the soldiers who fought under him, right? Pompey is so popular because he's the one who takes care of his generals, or his soldiers.
Okay. So how was he rich in the first place? Inherited?
Pompey?
Yeah.
He's part of a noble family.
Okay. Yes.
So they're in the Senate.
He's a Nepo baby.
As are more or less all of these guys. The one real exception, the real interesting ones are Marius and then, of course, Cicero. Cicero is fascinating, right? We have a ton of writing from this time period. Most of all Latin writing we have, most of all Roman writing we have, I'm pretty sure, from the period of Cicero's life was just written by Cicero. Part of that's survivorship bias, right? Because, well, it is largely survivorship bias. Everyone wants to preserve what Cicero wrote. His way of writing, which were largely for speeches, is just truly remarkable.
So he was speaking to people.
Yes, Cicero's a lawyer.
Oh.
And he ennobles himself, joins the Senate. In the Senate, he gives all sorts of speeches, right? His most famous are the Catalinian orations. This guy named Catiline tries to overthrow... Cicero argues that this guy named Catiline had tried to overthrow the government. We're not quite sure exactly what was going on, but over a series of 5 speeches, he launches into everything bad about Catiline, everything bad about his allies. By the end, Cicero gets him killed extrajudicially, without a trial, which is a huge offense, right? And he walks into the Senate and he announces, Vixerunt, they have lived, right? So he gets to be the one who announces the death of all the conspirators involved with Catiline, including Catiline himself.
Killed extrajudicially, so he was, like, killed?
Without a trial.
Oh, because they would kill people found guilty of treason or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's go back to Virgil and the Aeneid. So he was alive during this transition, and he was like, you know what I'm going to be one of those poets who really sticks it to the government and the bad actors of the day. And did he start that trend of poets doing that?
No. So Virgil shows up kind of on the scene later than this, right? So Virgil really shows up on the scene after the first triumvirate's over, after the second triumvirate has collapsed, when Octavian, who becomes Augustus, is emperor. And Augustus, commissions Virgil, who is this well-respected poet for the 2 poems he's already published, to write one great epic poem.
Oh, so he was working for the government. He wasn't sticking it to the government.
Well, he was working for the government.
Oh.
But there's this huge debate in scholarship about whether the final product, the poem that he produces, he doesn't finish it. He dies before he can finish it. But there's a debate about whether or not this poem is pro-Augustan or anti-Augustan, right? Whether it's, yes, this is good, or I'm writing this because I have to praise the emperor now because that's the power structure, or I'm going to be as subversive as possible in what I write here.
Pro-Augustan, the emperor was Octavian Augustus?
Octavian, who then becomes Augustus.
He changes his name.
Like 8 times.
So he's kind of like P. Diddy. He
What?
keeps changing his name.
P. Diddy keeps changing his name?
He used to, yeah, that was a thing, I think. I didn't follow that very closely. Anyways, so he writes this poem, and it's a great epic about the history of Rome. Now, was he using sources? Is this a peer-reviewed thing, or was he more or less given the reins to make it as fantastical as he felt?
So he's adhering to myths that already exist, right? I guess if you could call them sources, his main sources would be the Iliad and the Odyssey. He's familiar with the 2 fundamental, foundational Greek epics, and he's trying to create a Roman version of them. Aeneas isn't a character invented by the Romans. Aeneas is this character. He's a Trojan. He fights in the Trojan War, and he shows up in the Iliad. And then the Romans claim, well before Virgil's time, that Aeneas escaped the fall of Troy. So Aeneas shows up in the Iliad, right, as a Trojan, but the Romans claim descent from him too. The Greeks make it clear that he's the son of Aphrodite. So he is a demigod, right? He is this more than human figure. And the Romans, who have a pantheon very similar to the Greeks, make him the son of Venus.
Which is their equivalent to Aphrodite.
Yes.
Okay. Now, so the Trojan horse, the Trojans built the horse? No. Okay.
So there's this 10-year war between the Greeks and the Trojans over a girl. And right at the end of the war, Odysseus, who's clever, right? Wily. There are all sorts of terms that are applied to him. The man of twists and turns, right? He's clever, he's complex, he's tricky. The Greeks generally see this as a good thing, and the Romans generally see this as a bad thing. He more or less wins the war for the Greeks by saying, let's build this massive wooden horse and hide inside it and leave it outside the gates of Troy. And we'll say, it's a gift. And the Trojans will see the horse and say, wow, that's great. Bring it inside their city. And then Odysseus and all the other Greeks who are hiding in it, they'll jump out. They'll attack the city from within. They won't even have to get over the high walls of Troy. And they'll win the war. In the Aeneid, Aeneas travels through the underworld, and he sees Odysseus down there, more or less in hell, for being tricky rather than fighting virtuously.
Oh, interesting. So the Romans adopted a lot of values from the Greeks, but not being clever.
Well,
or tricky, or bending the rules.
Generally, when the Romans bend the rules and get away with it, they're proud of themselves. When other people do it, they're not happy about it.
Okay. There was no Geneva Convention at the time. You couldn't say giving a peace offering that's actually a prank violates the Geneva rules.
None whatsoever. But there are stories of how they deal with diplomacy that are quite interesting. One of the more interesting diplomatic stories is this Roman guy named Marcus Atilius Regulus, who is defeated by the Carthaginians. He's captured there, and then he makes a deal with the Carthaginians. He says, okay, if you allow me to go back to Rome, to speak before the Senate and say, okay, we need to have peace with the Carthaginians, argue for peace for you, I will come back and continue to be your prisoner until the war is over. And the Carthaginians trust him. They say, okay, you can do this. He goes all the way to Rome. He goes in front of the Senate and says, okay, we need to kill the Carthaginians. We need to crush them. We need to fight until we win. And walks himself back to Carthage to be tortured to death as a consequence. That is almost certainly not true. He very likely just died of natural causes as a captive. But the Romans do create this myth.
Interesting. And they put it in the Aeneid.
Oh, no. That shows up elsewhere.
Oh. So he's writing the Aeneid based on, he's kind of adapting these Greek myths with the Roman myths to make an epic Roman history. Does Greece show up in this history? Is it off? Does he admit to stealing, if you will, from the Greeks?
I don't know if he sees it as stealing. The Greeks, these epics are a part of Greek culture. He's trying to create one for his culture and tie it in with these Greek epics. So, it's like he's just writing another book in the series, I think, in his mind. But this one's for Rome.
Okay, interesting. So, he was commissioned. How long did he spend on this?
The remainder of his life. Years, decades.
Wow.
He actually dies about halfway through the project. And because it's incomplete, because he's not satisfied with what it is, as he's dying, he asks the people around him to burn it, to destroy the manuscript. He says, it's incomplete, it's unfit to be the Roman epic, we need to get rid of it. Obviously, that doesn't happen. But what we have is 12 books of what might have been 24.
Okay. So we have pretty much what might have been 24 that he planned to write or that were written?
That might have been, that he would have planned to write.
Okay.
We have all, more or less, that he seems to have written.
Okay. And he did this for Octavian, who was the emperor. Now, was he right after Caesar?
So, Julius Caesar, the first Caesar, is never really emperor. He wins the war, he comes into Rome, and has himself established as dictator for life. That doesn't last. Brutus, Cassius, and a number of others have him killed. Well, don't have him killed. They do it themselves, right? After
knives hidden in their cloaks.
What, he stabbed 29 times?
49 times. Yeah.
27.
27?
He's stabbed 23. There are a lot more senators than that, so not everybody did their part. But Brutus sure did.
Yes. And so he was only dictator. He wasn't ever emperor.
Exactly.
Okay.
Whereas after his death, there's more conflict. Eventually, Augustus emerges. Octavian, who becomes Augustus, emerges and he calls himself princeps, right? Kind of like the first citizen, the first among equals. But he's functioning as the emperor.
How different is that than dictator? Was there no Senate when he's emperor?
So the Senate exists for both.
Okay.
Dictator is an interesting office. It's baked into the Roman system. Whenever there's a time of great conflict, the Senate can take one person and say, okay, you will be the dictator. You have unlimited power to deal with this one problem, and there's a term of expiration on your power. It works every time except for the last time, right?
Just like everything else.
Exactly.
It works until it doesn't.
Cincinnatus, the guy they named the city of Cincinnati after, is famous for being declared dictator and laying down power as quickly as possible, possibly a number of times.
Well, that just came out of Ohio, didn't it? So, okay. Yeah, let's talk about Julius Caesar. So he was a military guy, and then he formed this triumvirate, and then he was, now if I'm not mistaken, the reason he was able to become powerful and make himself dictator is because he was popular.
Yes.
Did he appeal to the poor?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, in his military career, he's a general, right? Like I said, generals take care of their soldiers, their veterans. So, he's signing all their paychecks, metaphorically. They're all loyal to him. He publishes De Bellum Gallici, right? His text on the Gallic Wars. He describes himself largely in the third person and his conquest in Gaul, right? That's where Weeny Weedy Weeky comes from. I came, I saw, I conquered. He describes this battle he won in a single day.
Where's Gaul in terms of today?
Kind of France.
Okay. Yeah. Like, what is now formerly Yugoslavia.
Not really.
Yeah. Just like, okay. Back when they were having baguettes and whatnot. So he goes to what is now France, and he wins all these battles. And so this is like expanding the Roman Empire's reach.
Mm-hmm. The Roman Empire is constantly in this war for expansion, right? Conquering territories, more wealth. There's this system where generally the soldiers who conquer territory get some of that land, right? They ensure prosperity for their descendants. The Roman Empire is more or less constantly in this effort to expand.
Always more. They're never satisfied. Interesting. So let's get back to Latin poetry. Now, you are getting a minor in, as Kendrick would say, a minor in Latin. And so you speak it fluently with all the other people who speak Latin nowadays, particularly because that's what they still speak in Italy, or as it is called in Latin, Italia.
So, Latin is a dead language and has been one for well over 1,000 years.
Oh.
And
Newsflash.
and I can't say I'm anywhere near fluent, but I've studied it for 3 years now, and it's fascinating, right? This myth-making thing Virgil's trying to do in the Aeneid, and the way he does it. He adapts the Greek meter for epic poetry, dactylic hexameter, which has this bum bada bum bada bum bada bum bada very set rhythm that his language can't even really do. His whereas Greek very much fits that bum bada meter rhythm, that's called a dactyl. Latin has a lot more spondies, long, bum, bum. So he's working in a meter that his language wasn't designed for, in a format that his language, people have done it before, but he's trying to create the defining one. It's a Herculean task. I can see why he wanted the Aeneid burned.
Was Hercules Greek?
Heracles
Heracles
is Greek.
Ah.
Is a Greek myth.
Okay. So, interesting. So when you're studying Latin, it's not like you're just reading, modern works. It's mostly about the works, the famous works in Latin, particularly from this time period.
I would put it like this. When you learn a modern language, you're learning to converse in it, right? They're trying to teach you how you will use it practically. Because all the Romans are dead, they aren't going to teach you how to converse in Latin. They're going to teach you how to deal with Latin texts, right? You're going to spend a lot less time speaking it and a lot more time reading it. And you're going to be interested in how they spoke and wrote, or how they wrote, right? So you're training to read Latin texts. You're engaging with the classics.
So let's talk about this Weni Weedy Wiki, Vedi, Vidi, Viki, right? How many different ways can you say it? What would the Germans say? How do they pronounce their W's?
The, like a V.
Oh, yeah.
So the VU thing is it's interesting. Classical Latin, the Romans would have said Weni Weedy Wiki. But as all the Romans die off and other people start speaking the language, they speak it a little differently. Ecclesiastical or liturgical or medieval or academic Latin is what eventually develops, and the pronunciation is different. So people speaking ecclesiastical Latin would say Veni, Vidi, Vici. The V's are hard, the C's are soft, and they change the way some of the vowels sound.
Okay, interesting. So V's and U's were interchangeable.
They're the same letter.
They're the same letter?
More or less, yes.
What?
It's interesting. So it's generally pronounced the same way, though sometimes it's a vowel and sometimes it functions more like a consonant. Think of that double O sound we have in English. Ooh, right?
Book.
Tool, more like tool. But in tool or room, right? This ooh sound. If you put that at the start of the word, it's ooany, right?
Ooh-ah.
Ooany. And if you put it in the middle, it's moondi.
What does moondi mean?
Of the world.
Of the world. Oh. And how would you say world?
Mundus.
Mundus. And those are different declensions.
Yes.
Ah, let's go! I got it. Big fancy word. Do you want to dive into what a declension?
It's fantastic. So, in English, a word's part of speech is generally determined by where it is in the sentence, which means if you say, the boy sees the girl, the boy is the subject of the sentence, he's doing the seeing. The girl is the object of the sentence, she's the one being seen. If you swap those words around, say the girl sees the boy, it's the opposite. The girl is the subject, the boy is the object, right? In Latin, it's called a case system. So nouns change their ending based on what they're doing in the sentence. There are 6, kind of 7 cases. The word for girl would be puella. The word for boy would be puer. That's if they're nominative, right? If they're the subject of the sentence.
So we run into Latin in our everyday lives more than we realize, would you say?
I have a bias, A, because I really like it, B, because I'm looking for it, and C, because I spent a while studying to be a law student. So it shows up a ton in law.
In law.
Mm-hmm.
Like stare decisis.
Yes.
And see, what are some examples you can think of? The dome.
I'm in an international law class right now, so there's jus in bello, right? What is right to do in war? Jus ad bellum, what justifies going to war. People like their Latin abbreviations.
Anno Domini.
Anno Domini, A.D. Year of the Lord.
BC is...
So BC...
not Latin.
Is just before Christ.
Okay. That's just infuriating. See, now I was thinking, I was listening to some music and I came across some Latin. Can you translate this for me? Mama se, mama sa, mamakusa.
I cannot. Is that something?
Well, do you want to be starting something? All right, let's switch to a modern day, or, maybe 60 years ago, modern day Renaissance man, Robert Zimmerman.
Yes, my boy.
For those of you who don't know or who haven't seen the movie A Complete Unknown, that is Bob Dylan's real name, and he just changed his last name when he moved to, New York to start playing music. Now, you are a Bob Dylan aficionado, if I am not mistaken.
I'm a fan.
And he uses a lot of Latin lyrics.
Does he? He's very literate. He reads a lot of Ovid.
Okay. So yeah, let's just dive into Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm. In my mind, he's this fascinating figure, right? Because he starts out as this incredible American folk musician. He's obsessed with authenticity, right? With all these protest songs. And then he becomes something else slowly. When he goes electric, it's not just that his sound changes. It's that he becomes this self-aggrandizing figure, this parody of himself. He's no longer really interested in authenticity. He's telling a story, and he's part of the story.
He's telling his own story. He's making it up as he goes.
Yes.
Is normal folk music telling the story that's been told 1,000 times?
You could say that. I think normal folk music it's about telling stories that have an inherent significance to common people, right? Stories of people fighting oppression, stories of things people experience, love, but also suffering. Folk music doesn't have to be protest music, but it makes for some pretty impressive protest music.
It's all about raging against the machine.
Mm-hmm. Those guys obviously took some inspiration there.
Interesting. So he goes electric at the folk festival, and up until that point he was authentic, but from then he was just not authentic anymore. Did he change who he was?
That's a great question. I wouldn't say he's just inauthentic. I wouldn't say he was perfectly authentic before either, but he's making himself a character, right? His songs are no longer just germane to very personal real life issues. They're him trying to tell these complex stories that he's made up, and nobody's quite sure how these stories relate to his real life or anyone's. They speculate, right? Blood on the Tracks is this album that comes after a brutal divorce. And there are songs on it about relationships crumbling. And he'll say, oh no, that's just a story. That's not related. And it's not entirely his life, but there are reflections of his life in it.
Interesting. Do you think Taylor Swift got the inspiration to use breakups as song material from Bob Dylan?
I can't honestly say I've ever listened to her breakup songs the whole way through, so I can't speak to that.
For the record, neither have I. So, yes. Until next time, stay ignorant.